Alrighty, we're enjoying chatting. That's good. I've got a question for you to chat more about. So, let's gather for a second. Well done. Hopefully you met someone new. I've got a discussion question to get you going, so you will get some more chat time. Here's my question for you today. Do you or your family have any Easter traditions? Do you or your family have any Easter traditions? We've got some internationals among us. Maybe your home country has some particular traditions. 2 minutes with the people next to you. Maybe it's food, it's decorations, it's something religious. Do you have any Easter traditions? 2 minutes, off you go. Okay, let's come back together. Well done. Well, if we'd have had more time this morning, I'd have loved to have got a microphone and gone round and then borrowed different ideas from different people, but that could take a little while. But hopefully you've had some different things. Here we had an Easter nest. So they build a nest and then it appears full of chocolate eggs. We had going on a walk of witness. So different towns do this where they carry a cross through the streets. And lots of different things. I imagine lots of you had chocolate eggs in your answer. One thing I like to do, I think there's a photo, is to make an Easter garden. This is a lovely one to do with the kids. Where you create the garden, you create the tomb, and then you can sort of act out closing the tomb. This was our lockdown one, which was my favourite one. Do you remember that one? Yeah, this was really lovely because it was the Easter where you weren't allowed to go to church and you weren't allowed to even talk to your neighbours. We were all really locked up. So we made that and we put it out on our garden wall with a little sign that said, "Come back on Sunday and see how it's changed." And then we changed it. And then our neighbours left us little notes under the garden. So that was quite a special one. So there's lots of different things we can do. And the reason I wanted to start with that question, as I was preparing for today, I've been given the passage on Palm Sunday, which is today, when the church remembers that that passage is only one tiny little bit of the Easter story of Holy Week. So it's almost like, if you imagine a cake, we're going to today study this little tiny slither of the cake. But Holy Week, there is so much more to feast on. Do you get the picture? There is so much more to feast on. And I don't know about you, but sometimes the lead up to a bank holiday is actually more busy than a normal week. Do you find? It's almost like, in order to earn those days off, you have to really slave away this week so that you can sign off for the bank holiday. And the same thing happens at Christmas. And so actually what's supposed to be our Holy Week becomes our rushed week in order to earn our annual leave. Do you find that? We have to be aware of that. And so it could be quite possible that the next time you open your Bible to read the continuation of this story will actually be Easter Day, next Sunday. And if we do that, then it's like we've sort of monkey-barred from Palm Sunday over here, which is a joyful day, to the joyful day of Easter Sunday, and we've skipped out that whole middle chunk. And I think that middle chunk is actually super, super important. It's rich in emotions and the journey that Jesus took to the cross. And actually, that middle bit is where we kind of live out our life, don't we? We live out our life expectant of hope, but also in that place where there is sorrow, there is disappointment, there's betrayal, there's pain, there's suffering, those things. So I really want to encourage you today, between now and next week, to do some of that work and to look at that middle bit. And to help you out, I've printed, this is a reading plan, which has the passages that tell the story of the different days from now until Sunday. So you might just take, we've been going through the Gospel of Luke, you might literally just take the passages that say Luke, they'll take like 3-4 minutes, and read one each day. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, my kids' least wriggly time is when they're eating, so I'm going to get them at the dinner table, we light a candle, I'm just going to read it out loud as we eat each day. That's the way that I will practically be able to do this. So these will be at the back on the way out, and I'd encourage you to take one of those. So what do I hope to achieve this morning? Well, I hope that we can open the scripture together, that we can bring this narrative to life, whether it's the first time we've read it or the 40th time we've read it, and to leave today each a little bit more in love with King Jesus. That is my aim for today. So I've got Debs from our Life Group. Could you come and read our passage for us, please? It's there if you want it.
Oh, great, it's here. So organised. Do you open your Bibles or your Bible apps if you haven't yet? Do you have a look? We're looking at Luke chapter 19, starting at verse 28. Luke 19, verse 28. Jesus comes to Jerusalem as king. After Jesus had said this, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. As he approached Bethphage and Bethany, at the hill called the Mount of Olives, he sent 2 of his disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you will find a colt tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, 'Why are you untying it?' say, 'The Lord needs it.'" Those who were sent ahead went and found it just as he had told them. As they were untying the colt, its owners asked them, "Why are you untying the colt?" They replied, "The Lord needs it." They brought it to Jesus, threw their cloaks on the colt, and put Jesus on it. As he went along, people spread their cloaks on the road. When he came near the place where the road goes down to the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of disciples began joyfully to praise God in loud voices for all the miracles they had seen. "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest." Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." "I tell you," he replied, "if they keep quiet, the stones will cry out." As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it and said, "If you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. The days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment against you and encircle you and hem you in on every side. They will dash you to the ground, you and the children within your walls. They will not leave one stone on another, because you did not recognize the time of God's coming to you."
Okay, So how can we go about understanding a passage of narrative like this? So it's not one of Jesus' parables where there's like a clear moral message, nor is it one of Paul's writings that instructs us how to live as Christians. This is a narrative. It's a historical account. And so the way I still, when I pick up the Bible, my default of looking at it is something that my theology teacher told me like decades ago. And his picture was to imagine a window frame. So imagine you've got a sort of wooden frame with glass in the middle. And you're going to do three things with this window frame. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to look at the frame. So that's looking at the wood itself. So that's looking at the passage and saying, do I actually understand what's happening? Do I understand the words? Do I understand things that are being referred to within this passage? Do I understand the characters? Do I actually understand it? And then the second thing is to look through the glass, through the window. And so that's when you're trying to imagine how the passage would have been received in the time. So you're looking through, back in time, to the historical setting. And for that, you do need to know a little bit of context. You need to know a little bit of history in order to understand what was going on then. And then the third way is to look at your reflection in the glass. So to look at the text and to bounce it back and look at yourself in the light of it. So I find that a really helpful model when I pick up a text, and that works for Old Testament, that works for New Testament, for anything, to kind of think, do I actually understand it first? Do I understand the words? Do I understand what it would have meant then? Do I need to understand a bit of the history? And then to go, what can I see for myself? Okay, so not to jump straight to that bit. So we're going to kind of follow that three-part thing as we look at this passage about Palm Sunday. So what's going on? Well, it starts and it says, after he, that's Jesus, had said this. After he had said this. So it kind of implies that in order to understand this chunk, we need to know what this is. So we have to rewind a little bit. And so immediately before this moment going into Jerusalem, Jesus is teaching a parable. And he's teaching a parable about 10 minas. It's a tricky story to understand about money. And there's this story about a king who gives some money to his servants to steward while he goes away. He goes away for a time and then he comes back. And those who have put the money to good work, who've made interest or made profit from it, are praised. And the man who's just buried it and not done anything with it is condemned. So that's a whole different sermon. But it's about a king who has gone away for a while and who will come back to see what his followers have done. It's about a king who will go away, who will return. So that is the context. And I don't think that's insignificant that Jesus is teaching about a king, and then he mounts a donkey, and there's this king-like procession into Jerusalem. Okay, he's hinting to them. And then we get this really funny bit where he instructs his disciples to go into the village and find this donkey, like basically steal a donkey or borrow a donkey. And so is this like showing Jesus' kind of divinity, that he knows there will be a donkey there? Or has he actually, just more practically, has he asked someone to borrow a donkey previously, and they've already arranged it, and they're going to pick it up? It's quite plausible that actually it's that one, because this is an area where he's got lots of friends. He's well known in that area, and the person that they borrow the donkey for seems to know Jesus, because when they say, the Lord wants it, he's like, oh, okay, you can have it. So it's probably prearranged, but there's something deeply symbolic about this donkey. So we get some particular details about this donkey. It's a colt that no one has ever ridden. So that means it's a young donkey, a donkey that doesn't yet have a saddle, hence them needing to put cloaks over it to kind of make a makeshift saddle. It's a really odd bit of information to put in this text, isn't it? It's like, why do we need to know that it's a young donkey that no one's ever ridden? Well, the gospel writers, bearing in mind that they're writing after the resurrection, so they've kind of understood what's going to happen, haven't they, when they're writing this? They have realized that this is fulfilling one of the old prophecies. So if we could have Zechariah 9:9 on the screen. It says this: "Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." So this is one of the prophecies about the king that will come. And there's this very specific detail about him riding on this young donkey. And so the gospel writers have realized, oh, that's why he was riding that donkey. That's why he asked to go and fetch the donkey. It's like the connection has been made afterwards. And then we have the crowd that gather around Jesus and start to lay down their cloaks. So who is this crowd? Who are these people? Well, they're probably a Galilean crowd. They've come from the same direction as Jesus, from Galilee. And they're probably a pilgrimage crowd. If you remember why Jesus and his disciples are heading into Jerusalem, they're heading there to celebrate the Passover, the annual festival. So there'd be a whole swathe of people from the villages outside coming into town at that time for the festival. And it's a real ragtag bunch. You've got the 12 disciples. You've probably got some of the wider disciples. The Gospels talk about this group of 12, but then they talk about a bigger group, don't they, of 70. So there's probably some of them included. There's probably people who've witnessed healings. It says they sing because of the miracles they've witnessed. So some of the eyewitnesses. Maybe you've got Mary and Martha, Lazarus, recently raised from the dead. That would be an interesting one in the crowd. They're coming from that Bethany area. You've probably got some of the devoted women, maybe Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Susanna. These are the women who funded the disciples and provided food for them along the way. You've maybe got Mary, the mother of James. You've maybe got Salome, the women who would later bear witness to the resurrection. So you've got this huge mixed bunch, and you've probably also got just random people who were caught up in the moment. So that helps us understand a bit of the text, or the first half of the text. We'll come back to the second. So if we now try and do that looking through the window, what would it have meant for the crowd on that day? And to do this, I'm going to use a few paintings, actually. My degree was history of art, so I'm a big painting geek. But this really helps me to kind of visualize things. So if we could have the first one, the Flandrian fresco, please. Here we go. So obviously we have to remember, this is not first-hand evidence. It's not a photograph from the time, okay? That's really obvious. This is like an artist's interpretation using scripture. So we have to be a little bit careful that we don't kind of try to take our message from a painting, okay? Our source is still the Bible, but it can help us to kind of visualize it. And in this scene, I just love all the different emotions. Look at the different faces, the different reactions to Jesus. So you've got sort of awe, near the donkey's head, perhaps fear. You've got, near Jesus' hand, you've got the guy whispering to his friend. I can imagine him sort of saying, "Isn't that Jesus? Like, wasn't he supposed to be the one that raised the dead man last week?" Oh, point. Oh, this is getting really teachery. There, see him? You've got people begging here. Perhaps they've heard of the healings that have happened and they've got their own needs and they're saying, "Please, would you touch me?" Then you've got this guy at the back holding up his baby just to get a glimpse of the Messiah. I love that one. And then it's a bit dark. Right here, there's a man prostrate on the ground in worship. And these are the disciples behind. So all these different faces. I wonder, where would you put yourself in that scene? Today, who do you feel like in that picture? And then the scripture tells us they were taking off their cloaks and laying them on the floor before him. So it's sort of like a makeshift red carpet as he's going along, and they pick palm branches to wave in celebration. So the crowd are shouting, and they're shouting, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord." They're actually borrowing words from one of the Psalms. So these are people who would have known their scriptures. They're borrowing from Psalm 118, verse 26, which talks about a king figure who will come in God's authority. And the passage today starts to hint at the Pharisees' dislike of this chant, doesn't it? They try to shut down the disciples, they keep them quiet, and then Jesus says, if you do that, the rocks will cry out. So you can get a hint of the grievances that will come later in the week, where these Pharisees will replace this chant saying, "Blessed is the King." They will replace it with a chant that says, "Crucify him." And why are they so angry about Jesus being called the King? Well, for this you do need a bit of context. If we understand the Old Testament, God's people have been promised a king from the line of David whose kingdom will never end. It's the Davidic promise or the Davidic covenant. So it's in 2 Samuel 7, and then it's repeated multiple times through the Old Testament that God is going to send them a king, and a king whose kingdom will never end. And if you remember why this crowd are coming into Jerusalem in the first place, well, they're coming for the Passover, which remembers a time when God's people were rescued, were saved through the Red Sea. So they're anticipating a king who will come to rescue. The question is, what sort of king are they expecting? They're expecting probably a military victor. They've got the Romans oppressing them. They want someone to overthrow that, probably violently. So they're expecting a king who would charge in on a war horse. Instead, what do they get? They get a lowly king who comes on a young donkey. You see the contrast here? So some of them don't realize that's not what they were expecting. They were expecting this military victor, and they get this gentle, lowly king riding on a donkey. This is a king who's got the power of the universe at his fingertips, but yet humbles himself to the will of God the Father to go on a cross. And I was reflecting on this earlier in the week when my daughter, who's 4, was having a paddy, and she was like kicking against my legs. And I was sort of holding her like this. And the thought went through my mind, Joe says maybe I shouldn't share this, but the thought went through my mind of, you have no idea how much stronger I am than you right now. Like, if I wanted to, I could just drop kick you as I was holding her. I didn't do it, but that was the feeling as I held her, was just, you have literally no idea who you are hitting right now. Like, she's all like, and so there's a relevance for this. There's a parallel. Okay, here's Jesus, who, if we believe the scriptures, is part of the Trinity that was there at creation, at the birth of creation, has, power to heal, power to do all these things. Yet, he contains that, doesn't he? He contains that and humbles himself to be obedient to the will of God the Father, to die on a cross. All that power, yet, is contained. If we have a look at Matthew 27, what will happen later in the week? Jesus is the king who will go on to be mocked for his very kingship. If we read Matthew 27, starting at verse 27. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put on a scarlet robe. So they're like dressing him up as a king. Then they twisted together a crown of thorns. So they're mocking him with the crown, and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They spat on him. They took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. After they had mocked him, they took off the robe, put on his own clothes. Then they led him away to crucify him. And if we jump to verse 37, above his head they placed the written charge against him. "This is the King of the Jews." It's ironic, isn't it? It's sarcastic. So he's crucified with a very sign mocking him for what he was. So like me holding my screaming little girl, they have no idea. If you put the Carl Bloch painting, this is a Danish painter who's painted Jesus with one of the soldiers taunting him. The soldier saying, "You think you're the King of the Jews?" And he's got the crown on his head. But he's not violent. He doesn't rise to it. He's obedient. I've had the Graham Kendrick song in my head all week, the old song that says, "This is our God, the servant king." Do you know it? It's from like the 80s. "This is our God, the servant king. He calls us now to follow him, to bring our lives as a daily offering of worship to the servant king." This is the king that we worship. At the first part of the passage, let's look briefly at this second part. If we could have the final painting up, thank you. So then there's the scene of Jesus weeping over Jerusalem. So you can see in this interpretation, Jesus is up on the hill and there's the walled city behind and the temple. So why is Jesus crying? Well, it could be that he's crying because he knows what's about to happen to himself. In the previous chapter, in chapter 18, Jesus explicitly predicts his death and resurrection for the third time. He knows what's to come. But he's not actually crying about himself. Jesus is weeping over Jerusalem because he can foresee its destruction. So if you know a bit of history here, in AD 70, so that's like 37 years later or something, this city will be sieged and completely destroyed. And the passage says that it's because they have rejected the king that God has sent them. Because they've rejected the king, God will hand them over to another kingdom. Tens of thousands are killed. Tens of thousands are enslaved. The building of the temple is completely destroyed, and the city is systematically leveled. It's absolutely destroyed. And so here, it's as if Jesus is saying to them, if only you could see. If only you knew what was right in front of you. You've been waiting for a king, and yet you've missed me. So he's mourning for them. It's like he's saying, you thought my presence was limited to that temple, but that temple is going to be destroyed. So it can't be. There's a bigger story. I've come and I'm among you now. And after my death and my resurrection, I'm going to leave my spirit that is actually going to be in you. And you are going to become the temple. It talks about living stones, doesn't it? That we're living stones, and the international church is the new temple. They can't understand that at that time. His plan was so much bigger. So Jesus is a king who doesn't look like what they were hoping for. And as Holy Week progresses, the story looks more and more like defeat, doesn't it? It's betrayal from one of his closest friends. It's Jesus washing feet at the Last Supper. It's crying out to God in the garden and then being nailed to a criminal's cross. It looks further and further away from this dramatic rescue that they had hoped for, until the plot twist of Easter Day. So, how might we see ourselves in the reflection of this window frame? How might we use this passage? Well, I think when I was preparing this, I got quite a random picture, so I'm going to trust that it's from God. I kind of felt like there were two pictures. So the first one was a child's roundabout you get in a park that just spins round and round and round. And there you go. Felt like we can go round the kind of liturgical calendar or through the year and just circle it again and again and again, but actually not really go anywhere. We lead really busy lives, don't we? And Easter is also kind of celebrated in a secular way in our culture, that sometimes we can do that too. And it's just like, yep, whoosh, there goes Easter, then whoosh, there goes Christmas, and whoosh, we're going round again, round again, round again, and especially if we're really familiar with some of these stories. But by contrast, there's an invitation for each year to be going deeper. So if you had this second picture, this is a very imperfect illustration. But you know those like slides when you go round and round and round and round and round, and then you plop out the bottom. Or it could be like, you know, those charity things with the coin that you roll down and they go round and round and round and round. They get lower and lower and lower and lower. So this is the contrasting picture, that there's an invitation as we go round past Easter again, that this is a moment where each of us kind of circles a little bit deeper in our faith, or a little bit closer to Jesus, and that each lap, as it were, that we go round and round and round, there's a fresh revelation. There's a fresh revelation of who Jesus is and what he's done for us, and that we go deeper and deeper and deeper. So I started by asking about Easter traditions. Maybe you've got some already, or maybe this is the year where you think a bit more intentionally about what you do in your household, so that Easter doesn't just pass you by, and that as we walk through Holy Week, that's actually a chance for you to go that lap deeper in your own faith. So I really wanted us to have some time of prayer ministry. So we've got about 15 minutes. It might be something from the passage that has struck you and that you want to pray about with a friend. That's fine. It might be that you came with something today that you would like prayer for. It might be that picture of the crowd on Palm Sunday and who you kind of identified with, and get someone to pray with that. So we're church, and sometimes we do prayer ministry where we say, come to the front, and there's people, but also it's good just to pray together. So you can pray on your own if you don't want to talk to anyone, that's fine. But also this is a moment where we're family, and we've got a chance to pray together. So I'm going to ask Ross to come up and just play something in the background. Thank you.